My name is Eleanor Parker, and I am 68 years old. All my life, I worked as a diligent nurse, accustomed to the smell of antiseptic and endless overnight shifts. But never did I imagine that one day, right in my own daughter's kitchen, I would have a scalding cup of hot coffee thrown directly at me. The one who did it wasn't a stranger, it was Olivia. The very daughter I had raised with all the years of my youth. Just because I refused to hand over my credit card for my grandson Lucas to buy a gaming console worth $8,000, Olivia stared at me coldly, as if I were her enemy, and said, "If you're that selfish, then go live out on the street." In that moment, I realized the years I believed I had entrusted my life to my daughter were nothing more than a sweet trap. I once thought I was being cared for, but in truth, I was only being controlled. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where your own family turned you into a burden? If you were me, would you choose to stay silent and endure, or stand up and reclaim yourself? Leave a comment to share your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe to the channel to continue walking with me on this journey of uncovering the truth behind a family that only appeared peaceful. And now, let me continue telling you that story. I still remember vividly the day everything began to change. After my hip surgery a year ago, I was so weak I couldn't even stand on my own. The doctor said I needed at least 6 months of rest and physical therapy. I was living alone in my small house in the suburbs. But Olivia, my daughter, walked into the hospital room with a firm voice. Not giving me a chance to object, "Mom, you can't manage on your own. I'll take you to my house. That way, it's easier to take care of you. And it'll be less dangerous if you fall." At that moment, I looked at her with teary eyes. Part of me felt warmth, thinking I was lucky to have a daughter who cared. I nodded, not knowing that decision was the very first step into a sweet trap. The first days at Olivia's house, I truly trusted her. She arranged a neat little room for me on the second floor, right next to Lucas's room. Every morning, she brought me coffee. And Mark would smile and say, "Mom, don't worry about anything. Let us take care of it. All you need to do now is focus on walking again. And we'll handle everything else for you." I believed those words. I was tired. And I also thought, well, letting the children handle things, what's wrong with that? But at some point, that help turned into a chain tightening around every corner of my life. It started with the medicine. Olivia suggested, "Mom, give me your insurance card and prescription book. I'll pick up the medicine and handle the payment. It'll be faster that way." I agreed immediately, relieved that I no longer had to wait at the pharmacy. Then came the electricity, water, and gas bills. Mark said, "Let me pay." "Mom, everything's online now, and you're not used to technology. I'll take care of it." It sounded reasonable, so I nodded. But just a few weeks later, Olivia asked directly, "Mom, give me your bank password. That way, it'll be easier for me to transfer money and pay bills. You won't have to worry about anything." I hesitated. A strange uneasiness crept into my heart. But looking at her eyes so firm, so decisive, I felt like a child standing before her grown daughter. I was afraid of being a burden, of causing trouble. So slowly, I read out each number, each character. And as I spoke, the password aloud, I felt like I wasn't just giving away my money, but the very control over my life. From then on, everything began to change. Sometimes, I wanted to take a short walk around the neighborhood, breathe in some fresh air. But Olivia frowned. "Mom, what if you fall? Just stay home and rest. I'll have groceries delivered to the door. You don't need to go out anymore." I swallowed my desire. Instead, I sat in the little room, gazing at the maple tree outside the window, telling myself, it's only temporary. When I'm stronger, I'll walk freely again. But that temporary dragged on endlessly. I realized I was becoming invisible. Old friends from the church women's group called, but Olivia was always the one to pick up first. Mom's resting. She can't talk right now. Maybe next time. I sat right there, hearing every word, but not allowed to speak. Once, my close friend Carol came by with a basket of apple pies. Just like every year, I happily rushed out. But Olivia blocked the way. Mom's still weak. She can't have visitors. I'll take it for her. I stood behind, quietly watching Carol turn away. Her shoulders a little slumped. My heart shattered into pieces. Little by little, I no longer felt like a mother. No longer the owner of my own life. I was just a shadow hiding in a house that was never mine. Olivia began saying things I never imagined she could say to her own mother. You should be grateful we let you stay here. Otherwise, how would you survive? Don't waste money on useless things anymore. Let me decide. I know what's best for you better than you do. Those words cut into me like knives. I wanted to resist, to reclaim a bit of independence. But every time I saw Olivia's annoyed frown and Mark's weary shake of the head, I swallowed my voice. I remember one evening, Lucas burst into my room, throwing an ad for a computer on my bed. Grandma, I want this one. It's only $8,000. Mom said you have money. Just give me your card. I trembled. I wasn't an ATM. But when I shook my head, Olivia shouted from the living room, Mom, my son just asked for a little gift. How can you be so stingy when you're so rich? I was speechless. Rich? I had some savings from a lifetime of nursing. But that wasn't for indulgence. It was for medicine. For illness. For the final stretch of my life. Yet in my daughter's eyes, it was nothing more than a gold mine she had the right to drain. Many nights I lay awake, remembering my husband William. Before he passed, he once told me, Ellie, never let anyone take away your freedom, not even your children. Love must always come with respect. I nodded that day. But now I was letting my own daughter turn me into a wooden puppet, controlled at will. The pain wasn't just in my body after surgery, but in my soul, being dismissed by my own blood. Every time Olivia flashed a fake smile at the neighbors, bragging that she was sacrificing to care for her aging mother, I felt an invisible hand tighten around my throat. I began to see clearly everything she did, from buying medicine, paying bills, to keeping me from my friends wasn't care. It was possession. It was control. And I, Eleanor Parker, had handed her the key myself. And so, what was called love and care turned out to be nothing more than invisible chains tightening around me. Day by day. Hour by hour. After a long, sleepless night, I realized that if I kept silent, I would slowly be swept away from my own life. The pain of being betrayed by my daughter suffocated me. But it also pushed me to hold on to something that was still mine. And so, I began with the smallest thing, remembering. One morning, when Mark took me to the pharmacy, I happened to see a stationery counter. I reached out and picked up a dark blue notebook, slipping it quietly under my long coat. My heart pounded as if I had done something forbidden. Strange, my whole life I had lived honestly. And now I had to hide a notebook from my own daughter. That night, under the dim yellow glow of the bedside lamp, I opened the notebook. My hands trembled as I wrote the very first line, June 13th, $120 withdrawn from PayPal at 3 a.m. I'm certain I didn't buy anything. My handwriting was shaky, the ink blotting through the paper. But I felt lighter inside. I knew I had begun a journey of keeping the truth, even if I was the only witness left. In the following days, I continued to note down every strange expense. $245 on Amazon, the delivery address under the name Lucas Pro. I asked the boy. But he didn't even look at me. He just replied curtly, Grandma. That's my game account. You don't need to understand. I sat in silence, staring at my own grandson, treating me like a stranger. In the notebook, I wrote June 15th, Amazon, $245. Not mine. Each page grew thicker. Like little bricks, I quietly stacked, building a wall against deception. I felt like a clumsy old woman. But at least I could still write. Still remember every detail. Then one afternoon, while I was sitting by the window mending an old shirt, I heard Olivia's voice outside in the yard, sweet, but loud and clear. My mom isn't sharp anymore. If I didn't handle everything, she'd be scammed out of all her money. I froze, the needle slipping from my fingers and rolling onto the floor. My heart clenched as if crushed in a fist. I couldn't believe my ears. My own daughter, the one I had raised all those years, was telling the neighbors that her mother had lost her mind. I went back to my room, opened the notebook, and wrote a long page. Today, Olivia said, I'm no longer clear-minded. But I still remember the day she graduated college. I clapped until my hands went numb. I remember when Lucas was born. I sang lullabies all night to help him sleep. I am not confused. I am just old. And being old does not mean being stupid. Each shaky word blurred with tears. But they became an oath I made to myself. From that day on, I began listening more closely. Once, in the kitchen, Olivia spoke to Mark. Her voice lowered, but I heard every word. You're withdrawing too much money. What if Mom finds out? Just say she's senile. Who would believe her? I don't want the neighbors gossiping. But I already told them Mom isn't in her right mind. Good. That way, if anything happens later, everyone will take your side. I stood behind the door, my whole body trembling. Their words pierced my heart like needles. I was no longer their mother, I was just prey, disguised under the label of senile. That night, I wrote again. They have already built a story about me. But I still remember every number in my account. Every bill. Every penny I saved, after 30 years as a nurse. I have not forgotten. I am still clear-minded. And I will prove it. I closed the notebook and placed it under my pillow. Outside, the night wind carried the faint scent of jasmine. In the dark room, I closed my eyes and drew in a deep breath. Inside my heart, a thin ray of light flickered, a fragile hope, but enough to remind me that I had not been completely defeated. One morning, I planned to go down to the nearby store to buy a few small things, an ointment jar, some herbal tea, and a new ball of yarn. I opened my familiar handbag, where I always kept the brown leather wallet William had given me on my 40th birthday. But today, it was gone. I emptied every compartment, searched the drawers of my vanity, lifted the pillows, looked under the bed. Not a trace. My heart began pounding, sweat gathering at my temples. I told myself, maybe I left it in the living room. Step by step, I shuffled downstairs, my eyes scanning the sofa, the coffee table, even the bookshelf. Nothing. Trembling, I called out Olivia. Have you seen my wallet anywhere? She glanced up from her phone, her tone flat, as if my question were meaningless. What wallet, Mom? You're old. You probably just misplaced it. Let me check later. But I caught the flicker in her eyes, not confusion, but evasion. Anxiety tightened around my chest. I turned away, swallowing my suspicion, though inside I was shaking. That afternoon, while the family was busy watching television, I quietly slipped into William's old room. Since he passed, it had been left almost untouched. On the desk still sat the bulky old desktop computer, the thick monitor covered in a thin layer of dust. I pulled out the chair and sat down, my heart racing. It had been so long since I touched this thing. But William had once taught me a few basics. I whispered a prayer. My love, give me the courage. When the screen lit up, the wallpaper appeared, a photo of the rose garden we planted years ago. My eyes stung. But I quickly brushed away the tears and focused on opening the email inbox. The one Olivia always said. No need to check anymore. Everything is set to automatic. And then I saw them. A string of email notifications from a real estate law office. One attached file caught my eye. Titled, Co-Ownership Transfer, Real Estate Property. No, my heart skipped a beat. I opened the file. Eyes glued to the words. My name, Eleanor Parker, was still there. But right beside it, under co-owner, was Olivia Parker. I bit my lip until I tasted blood. What had they done? This house was the blood and sweat of William and me. All our lives. We saved. Paid each installment. Repaired each brick. After William died, I held on to this house as if it were a piece of his soul. And now? Without my consent, Olivia had brazenly turned it into shared property. I forced myself to read carefully. The document was signed 3 months ago at the very time I was still strapped in a hip brace, limping with a cane. Back then, Olivia had handed me a stack of papers, saying, just some insurance forms. Mom, to make things easier. In pain and exhaustion, I signed without a second thought. I collapsed into the chair, my hands trembling uncontrollably. Tears spilled, blurring the screen. In my ears echoed Olivia's confident voice whenever she bragged, my mom isn't sharp anymore. I just handle things for her. Now I understood. She wasn't just handling things. She was stealing what William and I had built. I sat there for a long time, gripping the edge of the desk, torn between grief and terror. I heard Olivia's footsteps in the hall. Quickly, I turned off the screen, my heart hammering. Afraid she would discover I knew the truth. A gentle knock came at the door. Mom, are you in there? Don't sit too long in the dark. It's not good for your health. I forced my voice to sound steady. Yes. I was just remembering your father. Sitting here a little while. She stayed quiet for a few seconds, then walked away. I sat frozen, tears streaming down my face. For the first time in my life, I no longer saw my daughter as the child I once cradled. Before me now was a calculating woman, exploiting her mother's weakness to feed her own greed. That night, I barely slept. I tossed in the dark, my mind bombarded with questions. Why? Olivia, why be this cruel? Have you only ever seen me as a wallet? Even this house, the place holding every memory of me and your father, you couldn't leave untouched. I turned toward the wall, my chest aching. Memories surged back. William's laughter when we first stepped into our new home. His paint-stained hands as he painted the white fence himself. The afternoons we sat on the porch drinking tea, all of it now threatened. Just because my daughter wanted to claim it as her own. The next morning, I gathered my courage and confronted Olivia while she was making coffee. Olivia, I can't find my wallet. My bank card is gone too. Do you know anything about it? She froze for a second, then smirked faintly. Mom, I'm just keeping them safe for you. You forget things easily. What if you lost them? It's safer if I manage them. And the house? I asked, my voice breaking. I read the co-ownership document. Why did you do that? Her eyes flashed with irritation. She planted a hand on her hip, her tone sharp. Don't overthink it. I only did it to make the paperwork easier. You're sick. You can't walk. So I have to be on the title to handle things. I'm helping you. I stared at her, tears welling up. Helping me or taking everything from me, Olivia? That house is what your father and I built. You have no right. She cut me off, her voice ice cold. You're living in my house, eating my food. I cover your medicine and everything else. I just need a little financial security. If you don't like it, then you can leave." The words struck like a hammer blow. I went numb. In my daughter's eyes, I was no longer a mother, just money. Just a burden. Clutching my chest, I turned and walked back to my room, letting my tears soak into my blouse. That evening, I opened the dark blue notebook, my hand trembling as I wrote, June 22nd, wallet and bank card disappeared. House deed transferred into co-ownership with Olivia. I remember signing some papers after surgery, when I was in pain and half dazed. My daughter took advantage of that moment to claim it. This is no longer management. This is theft. When I closed the notebook, my hands were cold as ice, but my heart burned hot. The pain had turned into something else, silent rage. I knew then. Things had gone too far. And I, Eleanor Parker, could no longer close my eyes and pretend not to see. After the night I discovered my wallet and the house papers had been switched, I became like a sleepless soul. The whole night I sat by the window, watching the quiet yellow glow of the street lamps fall on the empty road, listening to the rustle of dry leaves swept away by the wind. Inside me rose a wave of despair, tangled with fear and anger. I tried to tell myself, Ellie, you must be strong. You cannot let them take everything. But I knew clearly on my own. I couldn't fight back. I needed someone to lean on. In that moment, I suddenly remembered Richard Hayes, an old neighbor, once William's best friend. Richard had retired years ago, but he used to be a tough lawyer, was well respected in the community. It had been so long since I last contacted him, but deep down, I believed only he would have the reason and knowledge to help me. The next morning, I gathered all my courage. I waited until Olivia left for work, while Mark was still dozing on the sofa. Quietly, I put on my coat, hiding the dark blue notebook and a small USB in its pocket. Each step down the porch felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds. I didn't go far, just to the next block, where Richard lived with his widowed sister. The old wooden door creaked open, and Richard appeared, his hair completely white, his frame still tall, despite being past 70. His eyes first showed surprise at seeing me, then softened into that familiar warmth. "Ellie, how long has it been? Good heavens. You look worn down. Come in. Sit down." I stepped into the living room, where old photo frames still hung on the wall. I saw one of William and Richard as young men, standing together at a community gathering, holding beer glasses, laughing brightly. The sight clenched my heart. Richard poured me a cup of hot tea, placed it on the table, then sat across from me. He looked at me for a long time, waiting for me to speak. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling as I placed the notebook on the table. "Richard, I don't even know where to begin. But I'm being robbed of everything by my own daughter." My voice broke. But then I told him everything, from when Olivia brought me to live with her after surgery, to how she gradually took control of my finances, cut me off from friends, and finally changed the deed of the house into co-ownership. Each detail, each entry I read aloud from the notebook, sometimes pausing to swallow my tears. Richard sat still, his hands clasped, his eyes darkening. When I finished, he sighed, his voice low and firm. "Ellie, this isn't just ungratefulness. This is financial abuse, and they've broken the law." I lifted my eyes to him, tears streaming. "But what can I do? I'm this weak. How can I fight them?" Richard shook his head, his gaze steady. "You're not weak. They only made you believe you are. You still have your memory. You still have evidence. And most importantly, you still have your voice. William always believed you were strong, And he was right. Ellie, I'll help you find a way out. Hearing those words, my heart felt warmed. I pressed my lips together, then pulled out the small USB from my pocket, handing it to Richard. Inside are screenshots I found on William's old computer, emails, documents, even bank notifications. I don't know if they're enough. Richard took it, his eyes lighting up. Enough. More than enough to start. The first thing you need to do is leave that environment. You can't resist while still living in their house. You'll only be crushed more each day. I shook my head, my voice trembling. But where can I go? I have no one, except Olivia. My old friends, I've been cut off from them. Richard put his hand firmly on the table. Cutting me off, I know a place. Willow Creek, a retirement community. There. You can live independently, with protection. And no one will have the right to touch your money. We'll get you out of Olivia's house. Safely and quietly. Tears welled in my eyes again. But this time, not only from pain, there was a spark of hope. I nodded slightly, clutching the edge of my coat with trembling hands. Richard went on, his voice resolute. I still have contacts in the legal field, and I know how to reach the Elder Protection Agency. But Ellie, the most important thing is you must believe in yourself. You are not senile. You are a victim. And now, it's time to take back control of your life. I sat in silence for a long time. In my mind echoed William's voice, never let anyone take your freedom. Ellie. I drew in a deep breath, raised my head to look at Richard, and said hoarsely, Richard, I'm so afraid. But if you believe I can do it, then I'll try. I'll go with you. Richard smiled. A look of relief but also determination. He tapped lightly on the notebook in front of me. This will be your weapon. Every number, every line you wrote, is proof that you're still clear-minded. We'll use it. And Ellie, you're not alone. In that moment, I felt as though a hand had pulled me out of a dark swamp. The shadows inside me hadn't vanished. But at the end of the tunnel, I saw a light from an old friend, from the belief that I still had a path forward. And for the first time in many months, I felt a whisper inside me. Maybe I still have a chance to break free from these chains. Richard kept his promise. Just a few days after our discreet discussions, he arranged for me to move to a place I never thought I would set foot in, the Willow Creek retirement community. We chose a morning when Olivia was busy with a meeting at the accounting office, and Mark had taken Lucas out to buy electronics. Richard drove up in his old moss-green car. I trembled as I clutched my small suitcase. Inside were only a few sets of clothes, the dark blue notebook, and a few mementos of William, our yellowed wedding photo, and the ring he had worn his whole life. As the car rolled forward, I gripped the armrest tightly, my heart pounding like a fugitive's. In the rearview mirror, I saw the familiar White House slowly fade into the distance. I remembered every brick William laid, every rose bush he planted, and I remembered clearly the bitter words Olivia had hurled at me. That had once been home. But now, it was only a cage of chains. Willow Creek appeared before my eyes like another world. The road leading in was shaded by maple trees, golden leaves drifting in the early breeze. Flower beds were neatly tended. Wooden benches sat under the trees, and a small pond sparkled in the sunlight. I instinctively squeezed Richard's hand. He smiled. Ellie, welcome to the place you deserve. I was shown to a simple but cozy room. A large window opened to the garden. White curtains swayed gently, and the air carried the scent of fresh wood. The manager, Laya, slender with a kind smile, helped me set down the suitcase. Think of this place as your home. Eleanor, no one here will control you. Whatever you want to do, wherever you want to go, whomever you want to see, it's all your choice. Hearing those words, my eyes stung. It had been so long since anyone reminded me that I still had the right to decide. On the first day, I joined the morning yoga class. The room was filled with sunlight, mirrors reflecting the faces of elderly people who still looked radiant. I clumsily twisted my hip, my body stiff from surgery. But the instructor was patient. Slowly. "Ma'am. Little by little. Your breath matters more than the movement." I glanced beside me and saw an elderly lady with snowy white hair smiling at me. Her eyes twinkling behind her glasses. She whispered, "Everyone's clumsy the first time. But soon, you'll feel young again." After the session, I stepped into the garden, filling my lungs with the fragrance of lavender. For the first time in many months, I felt clearly that I was alive, that I was still a free human being, not just a shadow hidden in my daughter's house. In the afternoon, I visited Willow Creek's library. The reading room wasn't large, but it was bright and peaceful. On the shelves, I came across the very novel William had loved. I brushed the cover with my hand, my heart aching. But instead of crying, I smiled. Here, memories were no longer strangled. I could touch them without fearing they'd be stolen. But that fragile happiness didn't make me forget my true purpose. I had to gather evidence. I began carefully organizing everything I had kept. Richard brought me a file box, sticky notes, even a small recorder. He advised Ellie, "Write down every detail, every day, every number. If possible, record what Olivia says. The truth will protect you." I nodded. At night, I sat under the desk lamp, opening the blue notebook. I recopied all the withdrawn amounts. The Amazon bill for Lucas Pro. The PayPal charge at 3AA.m. The Netflix premium subscription. I arranged them into clear categories. Richard reviewed them and nodded. "Excellent. This proves you're clear-minded. No one can call you senile when everything is this precise." Another time, I used my old phone, leaving the recorder on in my pocket when Olivia called. Her cold voice rang out, "Mom, I already told you. The papers need my name on them too. It's more convenient. Don't overthink. If you don't agree, then I just won't help anymore." I replayed that recording many times. Each time my heart ached. But I kept it. It was the truth. And no matter how cruel, the truth was my weapon. On long nights, I often dreamed of William. In those dreams, he sat with me on the porch, his calloused hand resting on mine, gently saying, "Ellie, you're not weak. You've only forgotten how strong you are." I would wake with tears on my cheeks, but my heart felt steadier. At Willow Creek, I also made new friends. Helen, 72, had her retirement account stolen by her own son. George, 75, had his daughter hide his mail to control his contacts. They told me their stories, their voices trembling, eyes red. I listened, sharing their pain. We comforted each other, and I understood I was not alone. One afternoon, sitting under the willow tree by the pond, I confided to Helen, "I once thought I was the only one betrayed by my own child. But hearing you, I realize this happens more often than I ever imagined." Helen squeezed my hand and whispered, "We're not weak. We just need a chance to stand up." Her words carved deeply into my heart. I looked at the rippling pond and saw my reflection. It was no longer the withered, helpless face trapped in Olivia's kitchen. It was the face of a woman learning to rise, to keep her dignity. That night, I wrote in my notebook, I left Olivia's house. I breathed the air of freedom. I met others like me. And I know I am not crazy, not useless. I was betrayed, but I have not fallen. And from today, I will fight with papers, with evidence, with truth. As I set the pen down, a surge of indescribable emotion rose in me. I knew the road ahead would not be easy. But at least I had stepped out of the darkness, and at Willow Creek, for the first time in years, I heard my own heartbeat clearly strong, steady, and still full of hope. In the first days at Willow Creek, I still carried with me a small wooden box, the only thing left from my old room at Olivia's house. It was the box William used to keep on his desk, the one I had hurriedly taken that morning when I escaped, clinging to it as a habit of holding on to the past. For many days, I didn't dare open it. I was afraid all I'd find were fragments of memory that would make my heart bleed even more. One afternoon, when the late sunlight poured gold over the maple trees outside the window, I sat alone in my room, heavy-hearted. I opened the box and found a few old photos. A pair of worn leather gloves William used to wear while gardening. And at the very bottom, a thick, pale yellow envelope, sealed shut. On the corner, in his familiar blue ink handwriting, were the words, "Open only when you truly need to." I trembled as I picked it up, my heart pounding like a drum. I remembered seeing that envelope many times before, but I had thought it was just old paperwork and never paid attention. But now, with the world around me crumbling, my hand felt guided by some invisible force. Slowly, I broke the seal. Inside was a check for $50,000. The paper was still crisp. Signed clearly William Parker. I froze, barely able to breathe. My fingers brushed over the numbers, tears dripping down and smudging the ink. Beneath the check was a neatly folded letter, its paper slightly yellowed. My hands shook as I opened it, my eyes blurred with tears. Reading each line, "Ellie, if one day you feel cast out by your own family, use this money to stand up again. You owe no one anything. You do not live off anyone. Nor are you a burden. You are the strongest woman I have ever known. I leave you only this, to remind you that your freedom and dignity are worth more than any house." William. I couldn't hold back. I burst into sobs. The cries caught in my throat, as if releasing years of silent suffering and endurance. I clutched the envelope to my chest, feeling as though William's arms were still around me, holding me with the faith he once had. I whispered, "You knew all along, didn't you? William, you saw this day would come. I was too naive, too trusting. But you gave me a way out." Tears soaked the envelope, seeping into the paper. In that moment, the pain of Olivia's betrayal still burned. But another force stirred within me. I understood that William had not only left money, he had left me belief, a door to step out of the darkness. That afternoon, Richard came by. I handed him the envelope, my hands still trembling. "Richard, look. William left this for me." He opened it, his expression sobering when he saw the check. Then he read the letter, nodding slowly, his eyes glistening. William was always a man who saw far ahead. He knew there would come a day you'd need this strength. "Ellie, this isn't just money. This is proof that you're not dependent on anyone, not even Olivia." I wiped my tears and tried to smile. "Richard, do you know, I once thought all I could do was endure. But reading this, I feel as if William is standing right beside me, telling me I still have a choice." Richard placed his warm hand on mine. "And you're right. You do have a choice. From today, we won't just collect evidence. We'll use this letter, this money, to rebuild your independence. Olivia cannot touch what William left for you." I nodded, my tears flowing again. But this time not from despair. They were tears of rebirth. The next day, I brought the letter to the lake at Willow Creek. Sitting on the familiar wooden bench, sunlight shimmered on the rippling water, and the breeze carried the gentle scent of fresh grass. I opened the letter. reading each word slowly. Like a prayer. A few friends from the community passed by, seeing me cry. They stopped, resting a hand softly on my shoulder. They asked, nothing, just stayed, sharing in silence. An elderly woman named Helen smiled kindly. My husband left me a letter too. Reading it over and over became my strength to go on. He wanted me to live, not just survive. I looked at her, feeling the spark of connection in my eyes. I whispered, yes, William wanted me to live too. And I will live. Helen. I'll live the way he hoped I would. That evening, I placed the envelope into the safe box Richard had brought me, along with the notebook and the USB of evidence. I felt as though I was building my own fortress. Each brick made of William's love. Each one of the truths I had painstakingly recorded. Before bed, I wrote in my journal, today I opened William's envelope. Inside was not only $50,000, but also faith. He reminded me, I owe no one. I am not a burden. I have the right to stand tall and protect my dignity. Even if late, I will do it. When I closed the journal, I sat quietly for a long time, pressing my hand to my chest. For the first time in months, I felt my breath deepen, my heartbeat grow stronger. Perhaps, from somewhere above, William was watching me smiling and whispering, Ellie, you are ready now. The news that I had left home soon reached Olivia. I knew, because the phone calls came without stopping. At first, her voice was sickly sweet, Mom. It must be a misunderstanding. Come back. I'll explain. When I didn't answer, her tone turned sharp. Are you really leaving? Do you know you're making a fool of yourself in front of the whole neighborhood? You can't live without us? And finally, it was nothing but screaming. Furious chaos. I didn't answer a single call. I let the phone ring and fall silent. The same way my heart had stopped depending on her voice. A few days later, Olivia showed up at Willow Creek. It was a calm morning. I was sitting in the community room, sipping herbal tea with Richard and a few elderly friends. The wide glass doors opened to the flower garden. Soft golden sunlight spilling across the benches. I was telling them how William used to grow roses when suddenly, the lobby doors burst open. Olivia stormed in, her stance aggressive, eyes bloodshot, hair disheveled. The sound of her heels clattered on the tile floor, striking straight into my ears. Her shrill voice cut through the air. Where's my mother? I know she's here. You think you can hide from me? Everyone in the room jumped. The receptionist stood up quickly. Polite but firm. I'm sorry, Miss. This is a private residence. You need to register before visiting anyone. Olivia shoved past, shouting, Don't play dumb, I'm her daughter. I have the right to see her. My mom isn't in her right mind. She needs me to manage her. You people don't know anything. I sat behind the one-way glass in a small observation room meant for residents who didn't want direct encounters. Richard sat beside me, gently holding my hand. My heart pounded. But this time, not from fear. I looked at the daughter who once lay in my arms as a baby, now screaming like someone out of control. All I felt was a chilling sense of estrangement. Olivia kept thrashing, shouting at the staff, her eyes darting everywhere like a hunter. I stayed still, quietly watching. My heart ached. But at the same time, a strange calm rose within me. I turned to Richard, my voice low but steady. Once, I stayed silent to keep the peace. Today, silence is my strength. Richard squeezed my hand gently. Nodding, he whispered, Yes, Ellie. Let her expose her true self. Through the glass, I watched Olivia unravel further. Her voice echoed through the lobby, Mom, where are you? Come out now. You can't leave me, you owe me. The words you owe me cut into my chest like a knife. I closed my eyes and a tear slid down my cheek. I remembered the nights I stayed awake rocking her to sleep. The years I worked late, hospital shifts, just to pay for her schooling. Owe her, I had given her my whole life. What debt could I possibly owe? The Willow Creek staff tried politely to guide her out. But she resisted. Richard signaled to security. A few minutes later, 2 guards appeared. Calm but firm. Their voices steady, miss. You need to leave. If not, we'll have to call the police. Olivia laughed bitterly. Her voice hoarse from screaming. The police, you're the ones they should call. My mother's being deceived. Manipulated, I'm her daughter. I have rights, but no one believed her performance. The eyes of the other elderly residents in the lobby held only pity and disapproval. The more Olivia yelled, the clearer her true face became. I sat quietly, wiping away tears, then let out a long breath. In the silence, I felt stronger than ever. When Olivia was finally escorted out through the gates, I stood and turned to Richard. My voice was rough with emotion, but clear. I once begged her, tried to explain, endured everything just to preserve our bond. But today, I understand. Sometimes, silence is the sharpest answer. Richard looked at me, his eyes kind but filled with pride. He said slowly, Ellie, you've done the hardest thing. You no longer fear your own daughter. I turned back toward the glass. Olivia's figure was fading beyond the fiery red maples. Inside me, the wounds still bled. But beneath them, a strength was quietly growing, the strength of silence. Of no longer bowing my head to anyone. I sat back down. My heart, heavy with sorrow, yet lifted with resolve. Still hurt. Still grieving. But for the first time in my life, I knew I had just reclaimed the most precious thing of all, the freedom of my own soul. When Richard and I submitted the files, the Elder Protection Agency did not hesitate. They launched an official investigation, summoning both Olivia and Mark for questioning. I wasn't present at that interrogation, but later Richard recounted every detail. Just listening, my heart ached. Yet I felt justice slowly taking shape. In the brightly lit meeting room, Olivia sat across from 2 investigators, trying to maintain her usual confidence. She crossed her arms, forcing a faint smile. I was only taking care of my mother. She isn't clear-minded anymore. I managed her finances so she wouldn't be scammed. It was all for her benefit. The female investigator lifted her head, dropping a thick stack of bank statements onto the table. Her voice was icy. If it was truly for her benefit, then why does Mrs. Parker's account show numerous late-night withdrawals from PayPal and Amazon, with the recipient listed as Lucas Pro? These are not Mrs. Parker's personal expenses. Olivia froze for a moment, then quickly shifted. My son, he just borrowed it for a while. But I was still in control. Nothing illegal. The male investigator cut in immediately. You call using your mother's retirement account to buy an $8,000 computer for your son. Not illegal. Do you know exactly what state law says about exploiting an elder's assets? Olivia went silent. Her face flushed red. At the other end of the table, Mark sat leaning on his elbow, irritation on his face. We only wanted the best for her. Ellie can't manage herself anymore. I was helping the family. Is that a crime too? The female investigator slid another folder toward him. This is the co-ownership deed. Do you realize that forcing someone who has just undergone hip surgery, under medication, to sign legal documents is considered forgery and financial abuse? Mark's face went pale, and he stammered, I just signed because my wife told me to. Olivia said it was for hospital paperwork. The investigator cut him off, her tone sharp as a blade. For the hospital's convenience, or for your convenience in selling assets. The room fell heavy. Olivia lowered her head, her lips pressed tight. For the first time, she had no defense. A few days later, The decision arrived. All accounts used by Olivia and Mark were frozen. Every unlawful transaction was under review. Williams and my house, the jewel of our life, was placed into a trust under my name. Protected by law. Untouchable by anyone. When Richard handed me the official papers, I broke down in tears. He laid his hand gently on my shoulder. His voice low. Ellie. What's yours has been returned? This is only the beginning. But justice wasn't just on paper. It was also in the desperate look on Olivia's face when she came to Willow Creek the next day. Unlike before, when she had stormed in yelling. This time Olivia stood outside the lobby. Her face smeared. Tears streaming. She trembled as she pressed her hand against mine through the glass door. Her voice choked. Mom. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Please withdraw the complaint. Please give me another chance. I've lost everything. I need you. I looked at my daughter, and my heart felt cut open. All those years of raising her, of saving every penny, and in the end, she wept not because she had lost her mother's love, but because she had lost control. I drew a long breath. My voice calm but resolute. Olivia, you only remember me when you lose control. But that is not love. That is ambition. She broke down, collapsing into a chair, her face buried in her hands. But I turned away. I was no longer the trembling woman cowering before accusations. I had risen. And this time, justice stood beside me. That afternoon, the sky over Willow Creek was painted amber orange. I sat by the familiar koi pond, where the fish glided quietly through the clear water, their scales catching the last rays of daylight like 1,000 tiny mirrors. A soft breeze drifted by, carrying the scent of fresh grass and a faint trace of lavender from the nearby garden. In that moment, an unfamiliar peace filled me. No more sleepless nights. No more trembling at the thought of Olivia. No more suffocating pressure. There was only me and the sweet stillness of freedom. Richard approached slowly, a neat stack of papers in his hands. In his eyes, I saw both solemnity and gentleness. He sat down beside me and placed the documents in my lap. Ellie. This is the official ruling. Olivia has been convicted of elder financial abuse. The court has approved the trust. The house and all assets belong to you now, untouchable by anyone else. I sat frozen, my hands trembling as I opened the file. When I saw the bold letters confirming the charges, I drew in a deep breath. It wasn't joy, nor was it satisfaction. What I felt was a heavy weight falling from my shoulders, leaving behind a vast emptiness. I whispered softly, "It's over. Justice has finally spoken for me." Richard said nothing, only laid his warm hand gently on my shoulder. That night, I returned to my room and opened my journal. The desk lamp cast a soft golden light over the pages. My handwriting shook slightly, but my heart was strangely calm as I wrote, "I have lost a child, but I have found myself again. I understand now that true love never comes with control or possession. I understand that my silence is no longer weakness, but choice. And I know that, even if late, I have found freedom." Closing the journal, I sat still for a long time. I remembered Olivia as a little girl, running carefree through the garden, whispering in my ear, "Mom, don't ever leave me." Now, between us was a distance that could never be mended. That pain was real. But strangely, it no longer crushed me. It had become part of the journey that brought me back to myself. The next day, I sat again by the pond with Richard. The sky burned with sunset, our shadows stretching long across the grass. He turned to me with a gentle smile. "How do you feel?" "Ellie," I looked out at the water, at the shimmering ripples of light, and answered slowly, relieved. "Richard, as if, after years of chains, I can finally breathe." He nodded, extending his hand. I hesitated for a moment, then placed mine in his. His hand was steady, warm, not demanding, not claiming just a place to rest. We sat like that, in silence, watching the sun sink behind the trees. The golden glow washed over everything: the pond, the maples, even our silver hair. I closed my eyes, letting the breeze brush against my cheek, and whispered words only I could hear. I am no longer afraid. I have found myself again. And from today, I will live not to please anyone, but to be at peace with myself. Darkness slowly fell. But to me, it was no longer the darkness of fear. It was the fullness of a day complete. And as my hand rested securely in Richard's, I knew a new chapter had begun, not with pain, not with fear, but with the peace I had longed for all my life. I sit here, recounting everything I've been through, not to complain, but to ask you, the ones listening to me, if one day, the person you love most is also the one who hurts you the deepest, what would you choose? Would you keep enduring in silence, just to preserve a fragile appearance of peace, or would you stand up, to hold on to your dignity? I know everyone's answer will be different, and perhaps there is no absolute right or wrong. But for me, only when I let go of a relationship that had turned into chains did I finally feel truly free. I want to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments if you were in my place. What would you do? Stay silent and endure, or walk away with strength? And if this story has touched your heart, please follow the channel so we can continue to share more stories about family stories that may bring tears, but also hope. Because I believe that only when we dare to face the truth can we find real peace within our souls.